Greetings in the name of the Lord. This is your brother and friend, Rashid. Just tuning in to share a quick word with you. I was compelled by the Lord to share this word. So open your heart and receive it. I'm coming out of John chapter 6. And basically, this is the story where Jesus is preparing to feed 5,000. And I'm going to kind of skip up a few verses just for the sake of time. So you can read verses 1 through 9 if you want to kind of get the beginning of the story. All right, I'm going to start at verse number 10. And it reads, I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible. It says, Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, in number about 5,000. Jesus then took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed to those who were seated, likewise also of the fish, as much as they wanted. I was reading this passage when I was on the plane, and God began to open this up to me a little bit. So I kind of want to go through it with you, and I pray that this blesses you. First of all, and we're just going to focus on verses 10 and 11. Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." He was talking to the disciples. He told them to have the people sit down. Okay. Now there was much grass in the place. So, I mean, if you can imagine being in a field or wherever they were and it being a lot of grass, you could probably imagine it being uncomfortable to sit down. It says, so the men sat down. They went ahead and obeyed what Jesus said and what the disciples did in number of about 5,000. So that's where we get the feeding of the 5,000 from. It says, Jesus then took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed to those who were seated. That's the part that I want you to really see. It says he distributed to those who were seated. So he instructed the people to sit down. There was much grass in the place, but the men still sat down. It says then he took the loaves and distributed to those who were seated. Likewise also of the fish, as much as they wanted. So what God showed me is that there's a proper posture or disposition to receiving what God has to offer, what God is trying to give us. There's a proper way that we have to be seated. And according to this, he outlined what they needed to do in order for them to receive the bread or the fish, whatever it was. Yeah, the fish and the bread. It's clear. He said, have the people sit down. And then if you skip down to 11, it says he distributed to those who were seated. So he didn't distribute it to those who were standing up. He didn't distribute it to those who were squatting. He distributed to those who were seated. So my point is, there's a way that we have to posture ourselves in order to receive from the Lord. A lot of times we're praying, but we got unforgiveness in our heart. We got bitterness towards our brother, hatred, all of these different things that don't allow us to have a pure heart before the Lord, where we can't receive the blessings of God. So, like I see a lot of times people say, well, pray for me about this or pray for me about that. But a lot of times the issue is not that they really need prayer. The issue is that they need to get that thing out of their heart. They need to go and forgive their brother. They need to go and pay a debt that they owe. They need to get it right with their mom or whatever the case might be. So just 2 verses shows that it's about obedience. Because if the people would have said, well, I want to stand up, or I'm gonna position myself that I want to position myself, the way I want to position myself, I doubt that they would have been able to have as much fish as they wanted. I doubt that they would have been able to eat of the bread of the Lord. So this is really, really powerful, because obedience is better than sacrifice. Obedience is so key to receiving from the Lord. Too often we treat God like he's a genie or a magician, and we can do whatever we want, and God is supposed to just bless us with a job and bless us with our needs, not realizing that God has a standard. He told the disciples to have the people sit down. That was the key instruction. So when God gives us instruction, when we follow the instruction, verse 11 says, Jesus then took the loaves. So it wasn't until the people actually sat down that he distributed the fish and the loaves to them. And it says, likewise, also of the fish, as much as they wanted. So once he gave the instruction, they obeyed the instruction. It says they obeyed the instruction. Then the distribution was made to those who had obeyed the instruction. Likewise, also of the fish, as much as they wanted. So they were able to enjoy all the blessings of the Lord at that time because they obeyed the Lord. So the key thing in this short 2 verses is just obedience. It's obedience. And how can we obey if we don't know what God is saying? That's why it's so imperative that we read his word and see what God is requiring of us. That way we're not praying empty prayers, and we're not praying prayers when we really need instruction. The prayer can be answered once we get the instruction of the Lord to obey.